It's the first full weekend since the Prime Minister relaxed lockdown rules in England last Sunday. It's given rise to concerns of how best to police different situations now that there'll be more people out at beaches and other beauty spots. Well, we can speak now to the Chair of the Police Federation of England and Wales, John Apter. Thank you very much for being with us on Sky News this morning. There have been this concern, haven't there, that since the Prime Minister made his announcement last weekend, that this weekend, a nice sunny couple of days, would all be jumping in our cars and heading all over the place to various parts of England. Is that the police's experience? Have we been doing that?
Good morning. You're right, there was some concern, especially before we knew exactly what the relaxing of the lockdown would look like. There was concern that people would get in their cars and travel many, many miles to enjoy the sunshine and the places around the country. The difficulty for policing is that there's very little that we can do if people do choose to do that, because it's lawful. They're allowed to do it. And I know that there's been an awful lot of local authorities, councils who had real concerns that their local area, especially those places of beauty, would be overwhelmed with members of the public. So the policing position is slightly different. Well, it's very different than what it was before, but policing still continues. And what I really need to emphasise is, as well as the police officers who are out there on the streets, policing the open spaces and engaging with the public, there's so much that's going on behind the scenes, protecting our most vulnerable. Domestic violence has been a serious concern, children online who are being targeted, and all of that work continues, as well as the very visible policing that we see.
The Prime Minister wrote in the Sunday Mail today, he said it's a complex problem and we need to trust in the good sense of the British people when it comes to the relaxation of the rules, because they are a little bit more complicated than the simple stay-at-home message. And I guess it goes both ways, doesn't it? The public have to use their common sense and the police also need to use their common sense when it comes to looking at the situation as we all get out and about a bit more.
Absolutely. And look, the police have been criticised since the start of this, well, by a minority, I have to say, at the start of this crisis. But this was legislation that was rushed in overnight. I make no criticism of that, because that's what we had to do. And we were all finding our way. So there were a handful of errors of judgment, but that seemed to dominate the headlines. So I strongly believe that my colleagues have been using their common sense, their professionalism, and in the face of such hostility in some areas, the level of attacks on emergency workers has increased by 16% during this crisis. They're being coughed at, they're being spat at by people who are weaponising this virus. And the government messages have been mixed. I believe that they're better now, certainly from a policing perspective. But only yesterday we saw in London and some other parts of the country, people are protesting about the lockdown. And look, this is a democratic, free society where people can, have their voice heard. But when the Prime Minister and others talk about the common sense must be applied by members of the public, from a policing perspective, sadly, we see that a number of people don't have common sense and they certainly don't apply it. And when I have my colleagues who are being shouted at for doing their job, we had one officer or a number of officers who were lambasted by members of the public who all had their cameras out, videoing a stop and search encounter where a massive zombie knife was found. But the officers were still being criticised. I mean, what do some people want? So my colleagues do get frustrated, but the vast majority of encounters with the public are, unremarkable. They go without incident, and the vast majority of the public understand it's a tough job and we are doing our best.
And that is obviously very good to hear. I suppose there is a question, isn't there, with this legislation being brought in so quickly, and you brought it up yourself, that perhaps officers need a little bit more training or better training, because we did hear, didn't we, in recent days, the Crown Prosecution Service admitting that all 44 charges brought under the Coronavirus Act were incorrect, which was a bit embarrassing.
Well, that was for a certain offence under the Act. Look, about 14,000 fines have been issued over this time, which for a population of over 60 million is a tiny percentage. And the vast majority of those, I think it was over 95%, were issued correctly. But where there are errors, and this is brand new legislation, and the guidance that went alongside it changed a number of times, so it wasn't ideal. We were finding our way. And it's for the CPS and others, and certainly within policing, to identify where we might not have got things right, and they are put right. But look, we don't always get things right. I accept that. Policing is complicated, it's unpredictable, and things will sometimes go wrong. But it's not about being unprofessional or a willful negligence of not doing what's right by the public. These are unprecedented times. My colleagues are doing their absolute best on behalf of the public. And I think the vast majority of the public get that.
I think you're absolutely right. I certainly do think the vast majority of us are very grateful for the good work the police are doing in what is a very difficult time.